We have a shocking trade update to go over today as an NBA insider has dropped a massive Kevin Durant trade update as it pertains to the Boston Celtics that not only did no one see coming, but has big implications on the Celtics going forward. We're going to break down exactly what that report is and discuss how this impacts the Boston Celtics. There's also some other reports and rumors heating up that we're going to dive into today. But before we get into it all, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Celtics content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support over here as things start to pick up. And of course, as we know, the Celtics are going to be very active in this offseason as the draft approaches. And this is, it's going to be a little bit crazy. And a brand new report has dropped surrounding a player we haven't been talking about too much here on the channel because he has been kind of locked into a few different teams. But it is Kevin Durant, and you can see this report here. Kevin Durant reportedly had interest in joining the Boston Celtics at the trade deadline per Kevin O'Connor. Durant had already been denied by his top choices. There were rumblings at the trade deadline that KD wanted to land with the Celtics or the Knicks. New York's interest reportedly isn't mutual anymore. Boston's cap sheet and trajectory make that scenario highly unlikely. So, I mean, obviously at this point, is a trade for KD possible? Absolutely it is. And I'll dive into how they can make it work with their cap. However, it is not likely at this point. But what this means, this is a pretty surprising update. Now, of course, we know Kevin Durant right now seemingly wants to go to the Spurs. There's also the Heat as a part of his choices. There's rumblings about a lot of different teams. But for the Boston Celtics, they could have landed him last year at the deadline, which would have been a very interesting acquisition. And of course, the acquisition cost back then at the trade deadline was a lot higher than it is now in the offseason. But it's interesting to see now, and also Kevin O'Connor, it's important to note that he didn't say the interest isn't mutual anymore between Boston and KD, and clearly KD would be and was open to joining the Boston Celtics just a few months ago, so seemingly that would be the case now. However, given the fact that, of course, the Celtics are trying to shed salary and things like that, like in theory, Kevin Durant is on an expiring deal. You could make it work, but do they have the assets to beat teams like the Raptors offer, the Timberwolves offer, if they decide to go that route? And again, you can see this here. Durant has been linked to the Celtics in the past, even before his Suns days, dating back to when he was still with the Nets, but no deal came together back then. Now, the Celtics roster situation doesn't make much sense to bring Durant into the organization. The Celtics are looking to shed salary, and its preferred destination are the Heat, the Spurs, and the Rockets. However, the Suns have appeared to not like any of the trade packages, which, of course, now the Toronto Raptors are getting involved. And, of course, as Celtics fans, you'd prefer probably the Spurs or the Rockets, so that way he stays out of the Eastern Conference. The Heat would be interesting. I still don't really see them as a, competitive team, even with Kevin Durant. Like, maybe they'll be a bit better. I don't see them as a championship team. But, again, the important thing to note here is I'm not necessarily saying a trade is likely for Kevin Durant. And roster situation-wise, doesn't make sense. He's on an expiring. Tatum's going to be out. Like, if they want to try to compete next year and have a bridge year with, Kevin Durant in, Jaylen Brown, see how it goes, shed some of the other salary and Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porziņģis, and then maybe bring Kevin Durant back on a 2-year deal. And then, he has some chemistry with Jaylen Brown, and then you bring him in and he'll already be on the team if he extends with Jayson Tatum the following year. Like, there is some situations where it works, but he specifically wants to play in San Antonio at this time. But for the first time, we've heard that, if anything, this means that he would be willing to join the Celtics if they, brought up their offer. And there's been a lot of reports lately about dark horse teams, about teams that, the Suns aren't necessarily going to give in to his 3 list of teams, which is the Spurs, of course, the Rockets, and Miami Heat. But there's also the Timberwolves involved. Like, reports are the Spurs they're going to go for the best package, which doesn't necessarily help the Celtics either, depending on what they give up. But they do have some swaps. They do have some players they can give up, which if the Suns want to remain competitive, could make some sense here for the Boston Celtics. And you look at the team and you look at how their salary is, and we've been discussing this a lot and ad nauseum here. Jrue Holiday and, of course, Kristaps Porziņģis. Those are the 2 guys that are most likely to be headed out, especially given the fact that their salary cap, like they're in salary cap. They're in the trenches of the salary cap, and they're going to have to get out of the luxury tax. You're going to have to move on from one of Jrue Holiday or Kristaps Porziņģis or both. Now, and even Sam Hauser and guys like that. If you bring in KD, it makes things a little bit interesting. Now, this was a post on, I believe it was Reddit, and it talks about how you could get, if you're the Celtics, you could make this deal and, make it work. Now, it is a very complicated one, but the Celtics get Kevin Durant, so that's the only player they're getting back in this deal. They're giving up Kristaps Porziņģis, so Porziņģis, Gafford, and Najee Marshall go to the Suns. The Brooklyn Nets are getting some other players as well here, including, you can see there on the bottom, first-round picks and a second-round pick. So, they're giving up a couple first-round picks, they're giving up a second-round pick, and then, of course, Jrue Holiday goes to the Mavericks. So in this trade, albeit a complicated one, the Celtics are giving up essentially Kristaps Porziņģis, Jrue Holiday, and, of course, some picks and some other salary as well in order to get Kevin Durant. Now, The good news about this is, are you shedding salary? Like, technically, because it's an inspiring deal, you're getting out of Jrue Holiday's expensive contract. And in this trade framework, the Mavericks are getting, something that can actually help them win now. The Suns are the team I don't see doing this deal. Maybe like this is basically just trading off Durant for expiring deals, essentially. Kristaps, Daniel Gafford, Najee Marshall to the Suns. Like, I don't know if this is like they're only get a first round pick back. And the Nets are the team that's getting the majority of the assets here, which is kind of funny when you look at it in that way. But regardless of that, of course, the Suns, will they do this deal? Who knows? But regardless, this is a deal that the trade framework works, right? Because you're matching salary, you're giving up picks and all those things. And I would assume in a deal like this, picks would go to the Suns as well rather than the Nets. But, it is what it is. This was just a trade that, was made here. Regardless, let me know down below, would you do this deal again? It's not very likely. You're giving up Kristaps Porziņģis, Jrue Holiday, and first-round picks for Kevin Durant, which in theory makes some sense in the sense of it can make sense salary cap-wise just because of the way that this team is currently constructed. They need to get rid of some of those guys. But maybe Brad Stevens, I would assume, especially in a year where Jayson Tatum isn't available, they would rather go for picks if they're going to trade Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porziņģis, or maybe a young player that can perform going forward. Because again, it's a very complicated. It would be very difficult to land Kevin Durant. However, there is the flip side of, I still think he has some years left, right? He's mid-30s right now, 36, whatever he is. And I think he can be good till he's 39, 40, just given how good of a shooter he is. And if his body holds up, I could see a cool trio with him, Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum there going forward. And we know there's teams like the Sacramento Kings trying to get their eyes on Jrue Holiday. You can see here many teams will have their eyes on Jrue Holiday, including the Kings. The Kings have Holiday on their list of guards they'd be interested in acquiring, but the Kings offer hasn't been good enough. And this is relevant because clearly at this point, at least up until this point, the Celtics haven't been happy with their offers for Jrue Holiday. And Jrue Holiday is the guy that has more value than Kristaps. He has more contract. He has more years left on his contract. Kristaps is an expiring deal. So in theory, you should be able to get something back for Jrue Holiday that's of value. On the flip side, of course, Jrue Holiday is a bit older. He's not necessarily an extremely he's a valuable asset, but not every team is going to be knocking on the door because of his contract and because of his age, even though every team could use somebody like him. If he was 10 years younger, then absolutely, or even 8 years younger, similar to Desmond Bane, you'd be able to get 4 or 5 first-round picks. But I also think the Desmond Bane trade has helped the Jrue Holiday value. So is a Kevin Durant trade likely? No, I don't think it is. Is it possible? It definitely is possible. It would require multiple teams. Like, this is a 4-team deal here. But maybe that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, clearly the Suns aren't finding what they want from other teams. So at some point, they're going to have to either make a deal with the team they don't want to, whether that be the Toronto Raptors, in this case, the Boston Celtics, the Lakers. Like, they don't have enough assets. Like, Celtics have more assets than the Lakers to make a deal. Or, of course, the Raptors, Timberwolves, all those different teams. So let me know down below your thoughts on that. Also, a quick tidbit that came out a few days ago is some credit to Joe Mazzulla from Aaron Nesmith, who's of course playing the Pacers right now. They're down 3-2 in the finals. But Aaron Nesmith credited Joe Mazzulla for his development. He said, that guy was with me every day. He pushed me and pushed me. So just giving some credit to Joe Mazzulla here. Hopefully he can continue to do what he did with Aaron Nesmith for other players on the Celtics, other young players. And it's going to be interesting to see how his coaching style continues to develop, especially in a down year, assuming Jayson Tatum is out for the year. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. You guys are being. Thanks for watching. See you there.